Hi, and welcome to another movie Battleground match. I'm Malcolm the Connole, and I'm hosting Dan Skip Allen versus Caleb Boatman. Dan, I believe, is on one. I'm not sure what his record is. I'm sure someone will correct me. And Caleb is just debuting, but before we get to them, we've got a few great judges here. Brian, I believe might be your first time judging. How's it going?
It's going pretty good. I actually just even started watching the Battleground matches not too long ago. Got into it. Making my first appearance here judging, and hopefully I'll eventually compete too.
And also here, you probably saw him in a team match facing off against Brian as James Wright. James, how's it going?
Oh, I'm doing good until you brought that up, Malcolm. Thank you. Just twist that knife a little deeper. No, I'm doing great. This is my second time judging. I had a blast doing the last one. Dan and Caleb are both very knowledgeable players, so I'm excited to see how this goes.
But anyway, now to introduce our competitors. Introducing first, with a record of 0-1, we have Dan Skip Allen. Dan?
1-0. 1-0.
I knew there was one there somewhere, but either way, they're going to correct me in the editing anyway. So, how's it going?
I'm doing great. I've been waiting for this for a while. I didn't expect Caleb to be my opponent, so I had to wait a little while longer so Caleb can come up with his answers to the questions and so forth. So, but I've been waiting for this for a while, and I'm hoping I'm ready to go here. I'm really pumped up here.
And introducing second, he has a record of 0-0. It's his debut in Battleground. Caleb Littleboat Boatman. Caleb, are you intimidated by Dan?
Dan's a really nice guy. I wouldn't say I'm intimidated by him. I think it's going to be a really good match. It's going to be a really good fight. In the words of Dante from Clerks, I wasn't even supposed to be here today. I was not. This was not supposed to be my match. This was supposed to be somebody else. They dropped out, so now I'm here. This is going to be a whole lot of fun. I haven't done this yet. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how I do. I think I can get some good points in there, but I know Dan's very good at doing this type of thing. So I'm interested to see how this goes.
And the rules are as follows: everyone has 3 prepared questions, and which goes, you've got an opening of 2 minutes, a main round of 5 minutes, and a closing of at least 2 minutes. There's no filibustering, no touching of the hair or face, no slapping each other senseless. But this is going to be this is going to be fun. And let's kick it off. The first question we've got is, what is the best film in George A. Romero's Living Dead franchise? And because Dan's got a record in this, I'm going to go to him first. Dan, what movie did you pick? And your opening begins in 2 minutes once I actually set up the time.
Well, I chose Night of the Living Dead from 1968. This is a black and white film. He wrote, he directed, he did the photography on it, and he edited. He did all these things on this film. It's a black and white film. It started off the zombie craze that we are in right now. We're talking about movies earlier this evening about a zombie movie. This is during a time of strife in our country between black people and white people. And so there's a lot of symbolism. There's a lot of things that you can relate to today that was in this film in 1968. And that's what makes it such a powerful film and the granddaddy of them all. It started the zombie craze that we have today with The Walking Dead, and we talked about Anna and the Apocalypse. We had World War Z, which Max, oh God, I can't think of the author now. Max Brooks wrote Then they turned it into a movie with Brad Pitt. This movie has a black lead actor in a time where black people were not considered to be the leading characters in movies. And so that was a very controversial decision. And he's helping white women. And there's arguments between white men and the black leading actor. There's so many different things about this film that make it such a great film. And it's far above the rest of the Night of the Living Dead trilogy that George Romero created. I mean, it blows those other films out of the water, and it's gorgeously filmed in black and white.
And that was a great opening there, Dan. And now time to go over to Caleb. Caleb, your 2 minutes starts when you begin talking.
Okay, I'm going with a film that took everything that George A. Romero's Night of the Living Dead made work and improved upon it. It really made the film structure. It took everything about that film and really made it work even better. And I'm going with 1978's Dawn of the Dead. That's the film that I'm going with. It took a lot of the elements that really did work in Night of the Living Dead, and it really improved upon them. It made the setting bigger. The film seems more grandiose. There's more symbolism in this film with the kind of commercialism and the consumerism and kind of the side commentary and how all this commercialism is kind of turning us into mindless zombies and all that. The setting just feels bigger. The kills feel bigger. Everything just feels bigger about this movie. It just feels so much more well done. The shots are done so much better. The camera work, everything about this movie just improved upon what made the film work. The acting's a little bit better. Everything's just a little bit bigger than Night of the Living Dead. So Dawn of the Dead, one of the best zombie films of all time. I yield the rest of my time.
Okay. See if that strategy pays off. One thing I did forget to mention in the rules is that everyone gets a 1 minute extension in the main round if they want to use it. But yeah, that's all I forgot. But with the opening's done, they get a 5 minute round, and your 5 minutes begins when one of you starts talking.
Well, the score of this Night of the Living Dead is phenomenal. I mean, all from the beginning of this movie, you hear this beautiful score. Not only is the score great, how about this? How about this movie was made on a shoestring budget of $114,000, and it made 250 times its budget. It made $40 million. This is unheard of. This is ridiculous. It's got crazy numbers beside it. Also, Dawn of the Dead is just a rehash of Night of the Living Dead, except it's not any good. It's horrible.
Okay, I want to first take in your point about the box office, because frankly, that doesn't make a difference. The fact that the movie made a lot of money on its budget, that doesn't mean it's a good movie. That doesn't mean it's the best movie. That just means it made money. It was popular. That has nothing to do with the actual quality of the film. That just means the movie made money. The Transformers movies, they made money. That doesn't mean they're all good. Like Transformers 4 made a buttload of money. That doesn't mean Transformers 4 is a good movie.
This movie's a phenomenal movie for that budget. Phenomenal movie for that budget.
But you're just saying that because the movie made back so much money, that means that it's like a great movie. That has nothing to do with the actual quality of the movie. We all talk about Dawn of the Dead being a rehash. It's not a rehash. It definitely took and was inspired by a lot of the elements, but it is in no way a rehash of the film. It's a completely new setting, completely new characters, completely new dynamics. It's actually about working together rather than being split apart. It's a completely new film.
My film has a 97% on Rotten Tomatoes, 89 Metacritic, 8 out of 10 from IMDb. It has one of the greatest quotes of all time. "They're coming to get you, Barbara." Right off the bat, as soon as you start watching this movie, a phenomenal quote that people remember. "They're coming to get you, Barbara." This is such a freaking amazing film. It blows Dawn of the Dead away. It blows all of them away. There's nothing you could say that could even come close to telling me that Dawn of the Dead is better than Night of the Living Dead.
Again, you're giving me a lot of stuff about like why people like this movie and like, or that people, not even why they like it. The fact that a lot of people like this movie and all that, that doesn't mean it's better just because it has these scores and all this stuff. You're not giving me stuff about the actual plot and everything. You're giving me all this background about like it was important. It was important. That doesn't mean it's actually a better movie. If we're actually talking about like entertainment value here, Dawn of the Dead blows Night of the Living Dead out of the water. There's so many
created the genre.
Kills in this movie.
Night created the genre. There wouldn't be this genre without Night of the Living Dead. It's chilling. It's scary. It's groundbreaking. It's a masterpiece. It's a masterpiece.
Just because it created a genre doesn't mean it's a better movie, though. It just inspired a genre. That doesn't mean that just because it's the start doesn't mean it's actually the best one.
It is the best, though. It is the best, though. You're just making arguments based on your opinion on Dawn of the Dead. It's not even close, Caleb. You can't even hold a candle to Night of the Living Dead.
If we're talking about what actually made the movie like more expansive and actually like more entertaining value, there are so many interesting, fascinating different ways they like kill off the zombies. There are more dynamics, and my movie also has like that social kind of commentary in there with the commercialism and the commentary of the mall and all of that. So it's more entertaining, and it also has that social commentary.
Nobody cares about malls. The mall doesn't make a difference. How about a black guy being in there with a white woman and a white guy, and they're arguing with each other because the white guy doesn't want to listen to the black guy, and it's so socially relevant to today because of all the things that are going on in our country. You can relate to Night of the Living Dead right now, and this movie came out in 1968. Caleb, come on, man, you're not making a good enough argument here, man.
Dawn of the Dead also has a black protagonist in the film, a black guy protagonist in the film. My movie also has that, and it actually is about kind of working together, where your movie, the characters, it's all about the separation. It's really about rebuilding, recreating. That movie came out in 1978, so it's only a little 10 years after. It's still a very old movie.
Compared to 68. It's not relevant compared to 68.
10 years is
nobody
not
cares
relevant.
about a mall.
10 years before it's relevant, 10 years after it's not.
Nobody goes to the mall and hangs out with their friends and blah, blah, blah anymore. They're taking their car somewhere. They're going. That whole setting of the movie is ridiculous in the first place. It's set at a mall. I mean, the other one was set in a farm in a town, and you saw a
time. Whew. And that was definitely a heated argument. But yeah, now it's down to our closings, and because Dan kicked off the openings, I'm going to go Caleb first with the closings. And Caleb, your closing begins when you start talking.
Dawn of the Dead is just a plain, more expansive, more better movie. It took so many different dynamics of the characters and different things, and it really just kind of expanded the universe of the film. Night of the Living Dead is this kind of smaller type film, and it really was expanded by Dawn of the Dead. It expanded the lore and expanded the universe and all that, and just kind of attacked the mall premise that nobody goes to the mall with their friends. As somebody who is 17, and that when I was 17, but I'm 19 now, but when I was that range, you know, all these younger than you, I go to the mall all the time, so that doesn't make any sense. I go to the mall. I'm a younger guy, so I do go all the mall all the time with my friends. But regardless, Dawn of the Dead has so many interesting, fascinating ways to kill zombies. They're doing these different fun things. It's almost kind of a precursor to Home Alone in a sense. It's got just many different fascinating kills in the film. It's just a much more fascinating film. And again, the social relevance of this film really works. So I do find that Dawn of the Dead works much better than Night of the Living Dead. I'll yield the rest of my time.
And Dan, it's time for you to wrap it up into a nice little bow, and your time begins when you start talking.
Night of the Living Dead is chilling, largely due to the stark black and white photography. Dawn of the Dead jumped to color and lost a lot of its impact as a result. The zombies were painted in artificial blue. The blood effects look fake, and there is an overall cheesiness to the film. Plus, consumerism message is far less potent than it was due to shopping malls no longer being a symbol that they once were. The subtext about racial injustice in Night of the Living Dead is sadly more potent than ever.
Okay. This was very a tough battle. I'm going to go to Brian first. Brian, what did you think of this, and who are you going to give the first point to?
Well, my first hesitation coming into this was that, when judging this, I have to be sure to set my own feelings aside on a certain subject and go by who won the argument. Not being a big Romero fan, though, not that anything's bad, just not my kind of thing, I was able to put that aside and just judge purely by the argument, so I was really happy about the subject. Dan did a phenomenal job of explaining why the film was groundbreaking, it was influential, it was important. It started the genre, all those kind of things. But I think that Caleb latched on to the actual question, which was which one was the best. And he tried to talk about more why it was the best. So judging by that aspect, I think I give my point to Caleb. Although he might have just been hypnotizing me with all his hand movement. So.
It worked!
James, what did you think of the arguments, and you're going to give your point to?
Yeah, again, much like Brian, I've tried to take my own bias and how I feel about these two movies out of it. I'm also not a big Romero fan. I actually just watched both of these movies for the very first time last year. And I think Dan had a wonderful opening, talking about how groundbreaking this movie was, creating the genre and the amount of symbolism and really the racial dynamic there with having a black actor as the lead in this. And he really set that up. But in the middle round, in the arguing, I think Caleb was able to argue the point of why Dawn of the Dead was a better movie, because it bridged the gap and it built on a lot of the things. Having the better kills, having a bigger setting, having more creativity there. So I'm leaning towards Caleb as well.
And with that, Caleb does get the first point. Question number 2 is, what critically and financially successful movie should have had spawned a sequel or film franchise? And because I went to Dan first for the opening on the first question, I'm going to go to Caleb first on this.
Okay, I'm going with a film that not only would a sequel be very interesting just on an entertainment value, it'd be very fun to have this movie as a sequel because the original was such a very good movie. It's also a sequel that we need right now. It's a film that I think in this time we really need a sequel to this movie. I'm a younger guy, so I'm going with a movie that came out recently, and it was targeted at a younger audience. Not so recently, but the movie is Inside Out, Pixar's 2015 classic. I think there's a lot that you can do with seeing a sequel to Inside Out. You can really stretch kind of the world, do some world building there. I think you can see Riley grow up as if we saw Andy grow up when the Toy Story films were made. You can see Riley kind of grow up, or if we kind of want to expand the world and see different characters and see more of how the inside of the brain works, all that, I think we can really just kind of expand this world. And really, we need this movie to kind of experience, to tell kids really how to deal with these emotions and all that. And we really kind of need this, especially you can maybe get some more stuff with like the technology in there and how social media kind of affects us today and really kind of get in that argument. I think there's a lot of good stuff we can do with an Inside Out sequel and even a whole franchise with it. I'll yield the rest of my time.
All right, so Dan, you're up. Your 2 minutes begins when you start talking.
All right, this is a great film, and it needs a sequel because we have one character that his story, at the end of the movie, he still continues. He keeps going, and a lot of people are like, well, it won the Best Picture Oscar. But guess what? It's based on a trilogy of films. So now we can do the sequel, Americanize the sequel, and that is The Departed Part 2. The Departed Part 2, starring Mark Wahlberg in Sergeant Dignam. Now he's Lieutenant Dignam. He's going to create his own task force where there was a gap from the Irish mob. Now the Italians from Providence come up and try to take that gap, but they get into narcotics and drugs. So they have to come up with a new task force. And Dignam has to go through the new recruits, and he picks out Michael B. Jordan. He's a young, black, up-and-coming officer. And he also, because his boss is dead, he has to have a new boss. So he's just not the leader of the whole thing. So he gets a new boss. And his boss happens to be Al Pacino. He's Italian, the Italian mob. So there's a connection between Dignam's boss, played by Al Pacino, and the Italian mob, who is starting to take over the Irish section of Boston. And then, of course, he picks his own guy to go on the task force from those new recruits as well, and that's Henry Goulden. And then you have a diverse cast. You have a black officer. You have an Asian officer. You still have Mark Wahlberg's Dignam, who's in charge of these guys. And then you have this whole cat and mouse game going on again with different actors, different characters, a different mob who's taking over where the Irish mob left off. And if you remember, there's an Infernal Affairs 2 and an Infernal Affairs 3. So in this world,
right, they definitely can't have picked two very different movies for this debate. So this is going to be interesting, and it's going to be interesting to see where they go. Now, just remember, the argument is why you think they should have a sequel, not pitch a sequel to the movie. So just sort of get it out there so no one goes on a tangent. So, but the 5 minutes starts when someone begins talking.
Okay, I think Departed is one of the best movies of all time. I think it really wrapped up everything kind of not nicely, where it was like all the loose ends were tied up, but the fact that there were a few loose ends left untied is what made the ending of that film so poignant, and kind of adding an ending onto that. That'd be like knowing what Bill Murray says to Scarlett Johansson at the end of Lost in Translation. It'd be like knowing what the briefcase is in Pulp Fiction. We don't need to see more of The Departed. We got it perfectly wrapped up. Any more loose ends would be overkill. We don't need any more of The Departed. There was so many ideas in Inside Out that were not that they couldn't use because they didn't have enough time, that they have to add. Okay, sorry.
We do. Dignam needs to have his own movie. He needs to be the lieutenant. He needs to be in charge of the task force. And by the way, Inside Out, they're making a sequel of Inside Out. So you just pitched an idea for a movie that they're going to make a sequel to. It's in the pipeline for Pixar. She's going to be a little bit older. Riley's going to be a little bit older. So, and then this whole thing with the Italians, which they already set up, they're down in Providence Way, as Jack Nicholson said. They're going to come up to Boston. They're going to take over. And now we're going to set a new different cat and mouse game. And we have an Asian actor with Henry Golding as the mole for the Al Pacino character. And then we have Michael B. Jordan and Mark Wahlberg working together. This is an awesome idea for a sequel to The Departed. And we already know there's going to be an Inside Out 2. So, I mean, you pitched an idea of a movie that's already in the works for Pixar.
An Inside Out 2? No, there has not been confirmed an Inside Out 2. That's just
not
true. Pixar has never confirmed that Inside Out is getting a sequel. That's not true, Dan.
Well, I heard there was one coming.
Well, I'm sorry, but that's just not true. Anyway, and I don't get how Mark Wahlberg's going to be back on the force, because he basically left at the end of that movie, and then he killed Matt Damon, who people still think is like an actual cop. So I don't get how that your plot really works there.
Nobody knows, because they're all dead. Of course he goes back to work and he does his job and he gets a promotion, because nobody knows that they're all dead. Martin Sheen's dead. Mark Wahlberg's dead.
But how does he quit? Mark Wahlberg quit the force. Didn't him quit the force at the end of that movie?
No, he didn't. He killed Matt Damon is what he did. He didn't quit the force. And
that's because Leo couldn't get in contact with Mark Wahlberg. Leo, he was gone. Leo could not get in contact with him after Martin Sheen got thrown off the building.
He didn't quit. He went out and killed him in secret, and then he's got his job, and he's the only one left at the end. And then in the new one, he's going to get a promotion as a lieutenant, and he's going to be in charge of a new task force, a drug enforcement task force.
Anyway,
narcotics.
Whether he quit or not, that's not actually important. What is important is that you're adding too much to a perfect movie. It was wrapped up so perfectly, not wrapped up as in every little thing is explained to us, but everything that we needed to know is already known. My movie, Inside Out, I want to talk about that for a little bit. Inside Out 2, there's so many different possibilities you can really do to build this whole world, because this is a new kind of fantasy world. There's so many things that you can really do to kind of build this world of Inside Out. We can see Riley grow up, and we can see kind of the conflict of the phones and the technology and social media on today's youth, which is a message that as somebody growing up and now when social media is so prevalent, we need this movie. We need it.
Get another Inside Out. We're gonna get when Riley's in middle school or something like that, with whole new ideas and new lands that she. What I can't think what they're called. That she. Her whole islands. Her islands. Well, she'll get new islands. She'll lose islands. She'll get new islands. We're gonna get it. There's going to be a sequel to Inside Out. That is like a no-brainer. Everybody knows that movie was so successful. Of course, it's going to get a sequel. It's like saying Baby Driver is going to get a sequel. We all know there's going to be a sequel to Baby Driver. The Departed is based on a trilogy of movies, so there's already groundwork laying there for a second Departed and maybe even a third Departed, with some of the stories that you can mix and interweave from the Infernal Affairs films.
Just because we know that Inside Out will probably get a sequel, which we don't, but we can maybe think it might get a sequel, doesn't mean that it doesn't deserve a sequel. Really, the fact that we think that means that we all really think that it does deserve a sequel because we like these characters so much.
What? So that was definitely a heated debate there. I'm going to go to Dan first for his closing thoughts. Dan, your 2 minutes starts when you begin talking.
Look, The Departed needs a sequel. The groundwork has already been laid in The Departed for a sequel with the Italian mob in Providence. Dignam's going to have to get a new captain. Al Pacino, an Italian guy, would work out because then he could be in bed with the Italian mob and have them take over where Frank Costello left off and create this whole narcotics ring in Boston. Of course, he's going to go into the new recruits, and get his own little mole in there, and that'll be Henry Goulden. And then Dignam gets a promotion because he's the last guy standing after all that stuff that happened. So he'll bring his own new recruit. So he has a guy that can work with him, and they could work together to try to bring down this narcotics ring. Inside Out, we'll get a sequel. We know it. Riley's going to be in middle school. She's going to have new islands. Going to take some islands away, and she's going to have a new movie. It's a no-brainer. It's so obvious. This movie has made so much money, and it won the Oscar for Best Animated Film. I mean, it's obvious that we're going to get a Inside Out. No, why pitch something that we already know it's going to happen? Why not pitch something that nobody would have expected, And that's why The Departed sequel, after winning Best Picture Oscar, people, they're going to do a sequel or something. Yes, because there's a ground. They already have the work within the work of The Departed. They already have the stuff in there to do the sequel and create it and then make it diverse with Henry Goulding and Michael B. Jordan. So that's what makes it'll be interesting. We're going to have new characters, and Dignam, Mark Wahlberg, will be the main guy, and he'll be Lieutenant Dignam, and he was the best part about The Departed, and we're going to now have a second movie with his character. He was so good, his cursing and all his one-liners. I mean, he was a fantastic character. And I love Inside Out. Caleb, I already know we're going to get a sequel. I don't know why you
Caleb, it's down to you for your closing. Wrap it up and do a nice bow.
Inside Out is a film that we really need a sequel to emotionally right now. I think everybody needs it, but especially the kids of today really need this movie. And to quote noted Florida film critic Dan Skip Allen, it is a no-brainer This film, no-brainer. It's a no-brainer that this film deserves a sequel. That's why you're saying that, yeah, it's obviously going to get a sequel because it does deserve a sequel. You're exactly making my points for me, Dan. This film does deserve a sequel because it's a no-brainer we're going to get one because there's so much that we can do with it. There's so much around it. Yes, it's a no-brainer that this movie will probably happen. That doesn't mean that it doesn't deserve a sequel. This film definitely does deserve a sequel because there's so much emotionally you can do. And not only emotionally, there's so much comedy that you can really get from this. There's so many different things that you can really do with Inside Out that's going to be so interesting and imaginative and all that. That this is not only a film that's we're going to love and we're going to be entertained by, this is a film that we need right now. I'll yield the rest of my time.
Okay, right. This has definitely been an interesting debate here. I'm going to kick it off, and I did a bit of fact checking, and as of this moment of recording, Inside Out has not been confirmed for a sequel yet. So yeah, it's that did count. So yeah, but anyway, with the debates, I think Caleb did a good job of explaining sort of on what a potential sequel to Inside Out would look like, and we could go from there. And he did do a good job of knocking down The Departed a little bit, but I do think Dan did a slightly better job of arguing for The Departed because he brought up about the fact that it is, but that Infernal Affairs, which I didn't actually know before until now, that Infernal Affairs was actually a trilogy. He brought up that there is a story for a sequel that you can do if they wanted to, and I don't think Caleb actually ever knocked down that point. So for that alone and his idea for a sequel that he did pitch, I do think it can work, and my point will go to Dan on this one. James, what did you think of the arguments, and where is your point going to go?
I thought they were both pretty good arguments. I also didn't know that Infernal Affairs was a trilogy. I've only seen the first one myself. But I think Dan got a little hung up in pitching the film and not explaining why it deserved one as much as Caleb was pitching why. And really, Dan was kind of fueling the fire of why Inside Out should be getting one, because we all believe it's going to be getting one, even though one hasn't been announced. And I don't think he was able to kind of recover from that when Caleb pointed out that, yes, it does deserve a sequel. And I think Caleb pointed out there's more that can be done with an Inside Out sequel with the different emotions and the different age groups. So I'm leaning towards Caleb for this one.
Okay, so Brian, you're the deciding vote. What did you think of the arguments, and where is your vote going to lie?
Well, I also was doing a little bit of fact checking during that about the Inside Out thing. And basically, they've said that there are no current plans, but they're open to the idea. Is probably what the articles jumped on for the clickbait. But they said it'd be a while. They used Incredibles as an example of, someday if a good enough idea comes to them. But whether or not they were planning on it, that doesn't affect the argument. Again, I liked both. I liked both arguments. Like you said, both of them got a little bit too into pitching what the sequel would be, as opposed to why just something deserved a sequel. But honestly, I think that Dan did a stronger job, simply because not only did he explain how the groundwork's already been laid by the fact that it was a trilogy of movies, but also the groundwork has been laid within the movie, as far as the seeds of the other mob moving in and things like that. So based on that, I think I would give the point to Dan.
So with that, Dan gets the second point, so it is 1-1. So we will be going to sudden death. Now, for this one, it's for the question number 3. It's going to be a little bit different because it is a pitch question. So we're going to give them a bit of time in the opening to set up. It's not going to be timed, but I will probably stop them if I feel like they're going too long. Right, the question is, picture horror movie by a comedy director starring Benedict Cumberbatch. I'm going to go to Dan for his opening pitch first. So, Dan, pitch away.
My director is Todd Phillips, the director of the Hangover films, Due Date, Road Trip. Oh God, I have it in my notes here. God, can't think of the Due Date. War Dogs, and it's going to be a period piece set in the time of Mary Queen of Scots, around that time, and it's going to be a murder mystery where you're going to have horses and knights and corsets and the whole high court and all that stuff in Parliament. And Benedict Cumberbatch is going to be a guy that's going to be bickering towards the Queen, played by Keira Knightley, and he's going to have these agendas that he wants to get across, the people that he goes with, his party members in the Parliament. Then her party members, who amongst them is Martin Freeman, and they are trying to do their own little things about the country that this takes place. And he doesn't like what's going on. He doesn't like the agendas that are getting passed down from Keira Knightley, this queen, and her part of the party. And so he starts killing off key members of Parliament and her high court one by one in crazy different ways. So his ideas start coming to the forefront, and his ideas start becoming the norm in the way she starts thinking. And Benedict Cumberbatch is going to be the killer. And Todd Phillips, I think, has got a great mix of comedy and drama. So for him to do a horror movie with those sensibilities and bring some of that, you have people like Danny McBride doing Halloween, and Jordan Peele doing Get Out. So there's some comedy directors can get into the horror genre. And that's where, and I love a period piece murder mystery type of storyline. So that's what I have.
So that's definitely an interesting pitch. Now, Caleb, it's up down to you to pitch and pitch away.
Okay, so my film takes place in the late 80s, early 90s. Late 80s, early 90s, kind of in like the big kind of pharmaceutical drug boom. Benedict Cumberbatch stars as kind of a person who develops pharmaceutical drugs and all that, and he's kind of chemist experimenting with that, all that, really trying to scientist in that way. And he ends up taking this experimental drug, this pharmaceutical drug, and after a while, pretty much nothing happens at first. Weird things then start happening, and the whole time in the film, we don't know if it is the drug or what it is, and then there tends to be this mystery with maybe ghosts or aliens, like this kind of creatures coming, and we don't know, and things just get more and more psychedelic, more and more kind of visually crazy, and we don't know if people are actually dying or if this is all in Benedict's head. What is going on? If Benedict's a murderer, what is going on with Benedict Cumberbatch's character? We don't really know, and this whole time we're kind of following his kind of mentally unraveling, going from this kind of stable kind of scientist, this very well composed, well kept together scientist, slowly kind of unraveling to this unhinged maniac, and we don't know if it's because of the pills or if it's because of these creatures that are coming that we don't know if they're really there or really not, or what they are, what is going on. We're very, we don't know if we're supposed to be kind of rooting for Benedict as this kind of here to kind of get him out of this, or if we're kind of supposed to be conflicted as he's actually kind of the bad guy and what is actually going on here. And the person who I think can really do this story really interestingly, Terry Gilliam, director of Monty Python and the Holy Grail, director of The Fisher King, director of so many great kind of comedy dramas of the 80s, 90s. And I think the film that really shows off that he can do something like this very well, Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. the visuals in that were both kind of funny and kind of horrifying. And I think if you really went for kind of the horrifying kind of drug trip type thing, I think that could be really visually interesting, kind of this very visually interesting horror movie that we've got going on here, kind of different from a lot of what we've seen in the past. I'll yield, or whatever. I'm done. We don't have time, but you know what I mean.
Well, those are really two really interesting pitches. Now, because this is your last chance to use it, does anyone want to use a 1 minute extension? So it's going to 6 minutes. So your 6 minutes begins when someone starts talking.
Terry Gilliam is a drama director. He's not a comedy director. He's directed freaking Zero Theorem. That's a drama. He's directed all these movies that are dramas. That's not, I mean, he's already done some movies that have like horror kind of leanings. They have horror leanings. Terry Gilliam had.
If you Google comedy directors, Dan,
come on.
Terry Gilliam shows up on the front page. Gilliam shows up on the front page. Terry Gilliam, it was accepted as an answer as a comedy director. Monty Python and the Holy Grail, one of the funniest movies ever made. He directed that.
That's a period piece.
It's the best comedy of all time. We've got films like Time Bandits and The Adventures of Baron Munchausen. Those are both comedies. The Fisher King. You know, even his more kind of dramas have these weird kind of wacky kind of comic elements. So he is a comedy director, Dan.
And this movie that you're picking sounds like American Psycho all over again. That's what it sounds like. You're pitching American Psycho with aliens is what I got from that whole pitch. I mean, I didn't think that
part of the visually interesting kind of psychedelic elements that I think Terry Gilliam can kind of do well, like with Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. Dan, the thing is here, I don't see what Todd Phillips adds to any of your film. It feels like Joe Wright could be doing your film. It feels like anybody could be doing that movie. It doesn't feel like Todd Phillips had anything in particular to that movie because he makes kind of bland-looking comedies.
No, he does comedy/dramas. He does dramedies, and they have a good comedy element, but they also have a drama where characters can interact. He does great with ensembles, films with a lot of actors, which my film was going to have. It has because you have the high court, you have the queen, you have the killer, you have her assistants, you have knights, you have ladies in waiting, you have all these different type of people. So there's a lot of moving pieces, and there's a lot of mystery because it's a murder, and he has to be very secretive, even though he's yabbering around on his pulpit. Do this and say this and say that, and that's the kind of character that he has to be. But when things aren't going his way, he starts to, you know what, hell with this crap, I'm going to start offing people. And back then, the ways you could off people are some very interesting ways. And so the kills are going to be very different and out there, the type of kills. You're just doing a movie.
Visually, Todd Phillips doesn't really do anything visually. His films are always very kind of static, very still. He doesn't really add anything visually to his films. They all just kind of look basic. That's why when he makes movies that take place in modern times, it doesn't really matter because, you know, it's about the comedy. It's about Zach Galifianakis and Ed Helms and Bradley Cooper all being funny together. So it doesn't really matter that
War Dogs, a war movie,
an interesting director.
War Dogs is a war movie. Due Date's a road trip. He's done different types of movies. He can do different
types of movies, but visually they all just look the same. They look static. They look bland. Due Date, yeah, it's a road trip kind of comedy. There's nothing really in Todd Phillips that is shown that he can do these more kind of interesting type horror movies. That he can really do anything visually interesting or intriguing. You know?
Yes. The movie doesn't have to look anything great or anything like that. It has to look like the time. So it has mud and people take them longer to get dressed and the horses and the whole world doesn't have to look like this brilliant world. Look at The Favorite. It wasn't the greatest world. I think Yorgos Lanthimos used a couple different camera tricks to make it look better. But his whole world, he didn't need cinematography that's out of this world. It has to fit into the world of the movie. It has to be dirty and gritty and down to earth and that sort of thing.
I'm going to fact check my argument here, but I'm 99% sure, Dan, that The Favorite was nominated for Best Cinematography here.
Yeah, because he used fishtail lenses. He had tricky lenses.
Yeah, because Yorgos Lanthimos can do something interesting. He was nominated. The person was nominated for Best Cinematography. So yeah, The Favorite has great cinematography in it. None of Todd Phillips' movies have like great cinematography. They all look just very bland. He's a very bland director. He just kind of says to Zach Galifianakis, "Hey, do what you want." Do what you want
it doesn't have to look gorgeous. It doesn't need to look now. It's a dirty. This is freaking 2,000 years ago.
I'm not saying it has to look gorgeous. Nobody's saying, you're the only one saying gorgeous. I'm just saying it has to look interesting. That's all I'm saying. I'm saying it has to look interesting, intriguing. That's all I'm saying.
Aliens, which is just, I'm like, he just.
My film is not American Psycho with aliens.
That's what it sounded like to me. This guy's on some kind of trippy things and he thinks he sees aliens or whatever and some kind of drug or whatever. That's all it is American Psycho instead of.
There's more internal drama there, and there's more visuals in there. There's more psychedelic kind of visuals. We're getting this kind of Terry Gilliam-esque drug trip that we see in films like Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. I think I might have said Leaving Las Vegas earlier. I did mean Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, not Nicolas Cage getting drunk and winning an Oscar. But Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, there's the weird drug tips, the Dutch angles, all of that. Terry Gilliam will really have that down there. And I think we're going to have Benedict Cumberbatch really at the forefront, kind of giving this kind of performance where you see, Patrick Bateman is this really full of himself kind of happy guy. So it's not Patrick Bateman. Our protagonist in this film is not a Patrick Bateman type.
That's what it sounded like to me.
Well, he's not. So let me clarify. Benedict Cumberbatch is this character where he's just kind of this soft.
This is definitely a hard-fought battle, and it's not over yet. They've got their closing arguments to go there. Caleb, I went to Dan first for the opening. You can open first for the closing, so go ahead and do your closing.
Benedict Cumberbatch, scientist in this, is going to kind of be this kind of meek, kind of softer character. He's not going to be this kind of big, gigantic Patrick Bateman-esque Christian Bale performance. He's going to start off as this kind of smaller character, and as his mind is slowly unraveling, like his psyche is slowly kind of going down by what he's seeing. He's not sure what is real, what is fake, what is going on, and we, as the audience, are also not sure what is real, what is fake. We are being kind of put in the same shoes as Benedict Cumberbatch. So if it turns out that Benedict Cumberbatch is actually maybe killing people as kind of what could be happening in here, as it turns out, then we could be conflicted in this whole thing. We don't know. It's putting us through agony, not knowing. We want answers as much as Benedict Cumberbatch does. And I think Benedict Cumberbatch is really going to bring that. And Terry Gilliam, as a director, is really going to showcase that visually, because he can do things interesting visually, whereas Todd Phillips has never shown that he can do anything visually interesting. I yield my time.
And Dan, it's down to you to close. Wrap it up in a nice bow.
You just pitched American Psycho. I got it on. I can go throw it in my DVD player, Blu-ray player right now and watch it. You just pitched this freaking movie with. I'm pitching a period piece with a murder mystery going on, and you have a queen, you have corsets, you have knights, you have the court, the high court, you have a parliament, and him yammering up there on his pulpit, saying this and that, and things aren't going his way. And so, what is he going to do? He's going to take out all his opponents on the other side of the aisle, or whatever they call it in back 200 years ago. It's going to be muddy. It's going to be dirty. It's going to be nasty weather in England, because that's where it's going to take place, in England. And he's going to have all these cool, interesting ways of killing people that you can do differently way back when, in 2,000 years ago. You don't have to just shoot them with a gun like you would today. And so you're going to use axes, and you're going to use all kinds of different ways. And Terry Gilliam has done a drug-induced frickin' film already. It's Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. You said it yourself. We've already seen this, except you're trying to pitch some kind of modern, like, American Psycho thing. I think that's what you're thinking. You're thinking American Psycho and Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas or something. Terry Gilliam has done these types of films with Zero Theorem, with Christoph Waltz and Matt Damon. He's done these type of films before. I mean, I just don't see something like this being something new and fandangle that we haven't seen. We haven't seen what I'm talking about. You see these Mary Queen of Scots. You see these type of favorites, but you don't see murder mysteries where the people in the film have to uncover who the murderer is. Benedict Cumberbatch, this arrogant, high guy yammering on his pulpit, trying to get his points across, and things, he's just like pouting because things aren't going his way. So he just starts taking out all his competition one by one by one. Then his ideas and his agendas start coming to the forefront. The Queen, played by Keira Knightley, she starts, oh, I like you more, and this and that. Of course, Martin Freeman, he's over there trying to uncover the mystery, who's killing all these people. And that's what makes it an interesting movie. And period pieces, we don't have genre-bending period pieces like this. We get these period pieces that are biographies and about real people like Mary Queen of Scots or the woman, the Queen Anne in The Favorite, but not fictionalized horror movies where you got horror and gruesome, and you got a period piece with corsets and knights and queens and kings and all these type of people set in England. And that's what makes my idea so original, because you never had these two molding of two kinds of ideas like this, where you have period of 2,000 years ago, murder mystery, horror.
I'll stop you there, Dan. You're kind of going around in circles, but I'll stop you there. You've kind of got what you're going for. So yeah. Right. So we've got period piece murder mystery versus drug trips. James, I'm going to go to you first to judge this. Who are you going to give your point to, and why?
Oh man, I don't want to watch either of these movies, to be honest with you. However, I will say, even though I believe Caleb could, if he had another couple minutes for a rebuttal, could have rebutted Dan's final argument there about it being original, because I would argue that your movie's basically Abraham Lincoln Vampire Slayer. I think that Dan brought out a fully formed movie, was more concise with what he wanted to go with. Whether it's my cup of tea or not, I think he had the stronger film conceptually, so I'm going with Dan.
So Dan gets the first point. Brian, what did you think of this argument, and who are you going to give your point to?
Well, first of all, I got to say that Dan almost lost me when he tried to say Terry Gilliam's not a comedy director. So, I mean, yes, he's done dramas, and his comedy is not as broad as somebody like Todd Phillips, but Monty Python, and actually through all of his movies, there's definite comedy in there. But that being aside, the director on either one didn't really sway me, so that didn't become a factor. It kind of gave you a little bit of insight into what it will look like, but the director didn't sway me at all. As for the movie itself, I think Dan did a good job of describing a good period horror film, which actually the idea was very intriguing to me. I mean, not only would this guy be killing, but not just killing for the sake of it, but his motive of he's killing to try and tip policy, to get things on his side of the aisle, which I could see American politics going that way real soon. So I found that very, very intriguing. And just the idea of period horror, and I didn't think it sounded campy like an Abraham Lincoln Vampire Slayer. I saw it as more of a classy period horror. But then on Caleb's side, I think I got that he was going for kind of a psychological horror as opposed to it's a killing horror, but I think that's what he's going for, but I never felt that he quite actually got there. It sounded still more like a drama to me. And Dan made a good point when he said it kind of sounds like you've already seen this drug trip, who knows what's real kind of thing with Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. So in the end, I think I go with Dan on this.
And with that, Dan gets the point, and he goes up to 2-1. So Caleb will have some ground to make up in the speed round. But with that, we do go into the speed round. And we've got a couple of doozy questions here for the speed round. And for the speed round, for the first one, you get 30 seconds for the opening and 15 seconds for the rebuttal. And the second one, if we get that far, goes 30, 20, 10. But we're on the first round, and for the first one, we've got which franchise character did Keanu Reeves play better in the movies? Neo or John?
What did you say, Dan?
John Wick.
I heard it. Okay. Yeah, so I'll take Neo.
Okay. I was about to say I did hear John Wick from Dan first. Yeah. Because I heard Dan first, Dan does go first in this. Dan, your 30 seconds begins when you start talking.
John Wick was a freaking crazy movie, came out of nowhere. Nobody expected it. This story about a man seeking revenge for his dog. We had a great one with the hotel, the second one with the hotel. Now we're going to get a third one. So we have two great films already with a third one coming. You know, this whole world that they created with the hotel and then this whole Assassin's Guild and all this stuff that's going on. We already had two crappy Matrix movies after the Matrix. So you can't say those movies are any good. You got one good Matrix movie, where here you're going to have two great...
Caleb, your 30 seconds begins when you start talking.
Okay, when we're talking about the movies, sure, John Wick may have better movies than the Matrix franchise, but when we're talking about the character, about the performance of the character of Keanu Reeves, I think Neo is much more interesting, much more fascinating. He has kind of this journey throughout the films, and Keanu Reeves is actually very interesting. It's just the kind of the writing of the films maybe not be as best, but the actual character and the actual performance, that still continues as we kind of see Neo kind of start off as this kind of more lowly hacker and really get his skills up. John Wick, you kind of get John.
And Dan, your 15 seconds begins when you start talking.
John Wick, he definitely has emotional highs and lows in that film. He doesn't come across as a robot like he does in the Matrix films and the movies, and his performances make those movies great. That's why this is a better character for him, and Neo is just a robot. He's
time.
Wooden.
Caleb, it's down to you for your rebuttal, and your time begins when you start talking.
Neo is not just a robot. Neo is not just a robot. He actually has this kind of human journey from this kind of smaller kind of character to this kind of big figure. John Wick, we kind of already get John Wick from the minute we see him. There's nothing really that changes about John Wick. He's a very static character. Neo Matrix really has this kind of journey, this big old journey.
As Neil would say, whoa.
Whoa.
But this was definitely a good debate. Brian, who gets your point and why?
This is exactly the kind of question I was worried about, because I love these movies and I want to take my own bias out of it. Dan, early on, really kind of almost shot himself in the foot because he rushed into the question. Caleb smartly asked for repeat the question so he could focus on that he wanted the performance and not why the movies were better. So I think Dan almost kind of wasted his first 30 seconds. That being said, I thought he did a good job of coming back when he had his 15-second follow-up. He did a good job of explaining how John Wick had his emotional highs and lows, whereas in The Matrix, he was a little bit wooden. I mean, now character kind of called for it, but he was a little bit robotic. I'm gonna have to give my point. I think Dan pulled himself out of the hole on that one. I'll give it to Dan.
All right, James, who are you going to give your point to and why?
All right. For me, for that round, I actually was kind of in the same headspace as Caleb was, because Dan's entire opening was all about the movies and not about the character. And when he asked for the repeat, when Caleb asked for the repeat, that's exactly where my head was at as well. And yes, you did, Dan, you did kind of recover in your 15-second rebuttal, but I think that you were already behind the 8 ball, where Caleb was coming out saying why his character was better in The Matrix. So I'm leaning towards Caleb for that one.
Whew. So it's down to me for the tiebreaker.
Even though John Wick is a better movie.
Yeah. But yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat as James. I do think you, Dan, you did a good job of recovering, but I think when you rushed into the question and read about the movies, I think it did a little bit disservice to you. I do think Caleb did argue for his character better, so my point does go to Caleb, which ties it up 2-2, which goes into the final speed round question. And as I said earlier, you'll have 30 seconds for an opening, 20 seconds for a mid, and then you've got 10 seconds for a closing. So think very carefully about the question. And the question is as follows. Which franchise that has bombed is in desperate need for a reboot? Narnia or Divergent?
Narnia.
I heard Caleb first with Narnia.
I heard Dan first.
I heard Dan first as well.
Okay, so because both Brian and James did hear Dan first, I will give it to Dan. So Caleb, unfortunately, you have to argue Divergent. And because Dan got in first, Dan starts first. Your 30 seconds begin when you start talking.
I think Narnia, the first one, The Chronicles of Narnia, was great, but the second two movies, the Prince Caspian and the Voyage of the Dawn Treader, weren't that good. You have such a rich world of witches and fauns, and it's children, so you really have a lot of people that you could play towards viewing these movies, people coming to see these movies. And with special effects and makeup and all the different things that go on, you could really create a rich new version of this. And get a couple.
Caleb, your 30 seconds begins when you start talking.
Narnia is a film that really is a film franchise that had 2.5 really good movies. I think Prince Caspian is actually a really interesting kind of fantasy film that really kind of darkens and matures the franchise. Divergent is a series that didn't have a good movie once. It was a film that always was bad. And I think there is some really interesting stuff in the books, really interesting stuff that you can go to, that can be improved on, that can be the concepts of the kind of sections and the different wars of like intellectuality versus all that's and them really kind of at war. I think there's a lot of stuff that you can do with those franchises. That's why it does need.
And Dan, your time begins when you start talking.
Divergent had one good movie, and the second movie was okay, but it had already fleshed out its world. If you give Narnia some good directors for the second and third films, those films could really have been done much better. Bring me some new directors, and I think with a vision, and we could really have something going on with the Chronicles of Narnia.
Caleb, your 20 seconds begins when you start talking.
We already really got a fully fleshed out world with the Narnia franchise. We got everything fleshed out. We got everything really well done. It was this really kind of interesting franchise that I love. I love the first one and the second one, and even parts of the Voyage of the Dawn Treader. There's nothing really to love about Divergent. The actors are all bad. It just kind of feels like a Hunger Games knockoff. If it tries to do its own thing, it can be a really interesting franchise. But as it is, it's just kind of Hunger Games.
And Dan, your 10 seconds begins when you start talking.
New Narnia films could be for everybody, a whole new audience. Divergent has done it, and they did a great job with the first couple films. They already set up a wonderful world. Just the actors were jerks and did
Caleb, 10 seconds begins when you start talking.
Divergent is a film franchise that never really worked because it was always trying to ride the coattails of like the Hunger Games, the Maze Runner, all these other things. It always kind of blended into everything else. It never felt like it could be its own thing. It can now be its own thing. Narnia was already great.
This has definitely been a interesting battle. James, who are you going to give your point to and why?
Oh, going to me here. This, I think, was the closest question of all of them. I swung back and forth about 6 times during those arguments. Without getting into details on everything, I'm going to side with Dan on this.
Brian, who are you going to give your point to and why?
Well, for all this talk of the Inside Out sequel that supposedly was planned, I'm surprised that Dan missed the chance to mention that Netflix is actually rebooting Chronicles of Narnia. So I mean, clearly they feel it's in need of a reboot. So I thought that could have helped his argument.
I wasn't going to bring that part up.
Yeah, but like James said, though, I mean, this is probably the closest one because they both gave excellent reasons. I think when Caleb was talking about how Divergent never really got a good movie or didn't get to flesh out its world, the people that made it nothing more than a knockoff of the Hunger Games and those kind of movies. I think that to me gave me a little more reason of why it needs a second chance because it has potential that was never realized. Whereas Narnia, I think a lot of people thought they did it pretty good the first time. So my point would go to Caleb.
So I
It's on
set
you,
it up.
Malcolm.
Yeah. So I mean, this was pretty close because I mean, Dan did do a good job of explaining why Narnia deserves a reboot, and Caleb did do a good job arguing why Divergent needs a reboot. Now, the reason I'm swinging this way for the point is based on how well the other person did of defending the opposing one. And I feel that Caleb did a good job of defending Narnia and why it doesn't need a reboot. Unfortunately, Dan, you did touch on Divergent a little bit, but I wanted to hear. I mean, I know it's hard to put in a lot of why it should get a reboot in a minute of talking, but unfortunately, I don't think you managed to get in enough about Divergent. So, and your winner is Caleb Littleboat Boatman. I'm going to go to the loser first. Dan, how do you feel about your performance today, and do you have any plans sort of going forward to movie Battleground?
I thought I did a great job. I thought I hammered away on Night of the Living Dead, and I definitely deserve that point over Caleb on that one. And then, I said the actors screwed the franchise in Divergent, and that's why it folded the way it did. But you guys obviously didn't use that point that I made there. If it wasn't for the actors not wanting to be in the franchise anymore, it probably would have succeeded. But they just didn't want to be there anymore, and that was the actors. And I mentioned that, but you guys obviously didn't want to hear that point. But I feel like I know, obviously all people that don't win feel like they should have won, and I'm not going to be any different. I feel like I should have won, and I don't think this was even close. I should have got those first 3 points, but obviously that's not the case that happened today. I like Caleb a lot. He's a great guy, and I hope he does good in this league. But I definitely feel like I should have won.
Hey, I mean, we've all had moments in which we feel we should have got points. I know in my match against Superf, I felt I should have got a few more. I should have won that too. But no, like this is one of those ones like it's. Well, the points you made up. So I didn't count any of your Divergent points against you. Is more, I just felt like Caleb had said more about Narnia. Is more that balance really. But like you do play a good game. Is there anyone out there that you'd like to take on in Battleground?
No, just whoever I have to face next. I'm just going to do the same thing I did today. Just hammer away the things that I know and the things that I know I'm right about, and my ideas, and I'm gonna hopefully next time I'll win because I felt like I deserved to win this time.
Yeah, I mean it's why we have 3 judges, because everyone takes different parts out of arguments. Like and it's nothing against your debating skills. You did do a good job. But anyway, we're going to go to the winner today. Caleb, you weren't supposed to be here today. You came out of nowhere and RKO'd Dan. How do you feel about your performance?
Well, I feel good. I think Dan played a great game, and it was very fun to argue against him. And I think he played a really great game. I think this is a whole lot of fun, and it was good back and forth. I think, Dan, in all cases, I think he picked the better answers than I did. I think he had a lot of the better answers. But it's not about the best answers. It's about, the arguments back and forth. And that's where things get a little more subjective and all that, where I think one person can see one thing, one person can see another angle. And I think that's just kind of the fun of this is, you don't know. So it's about kind of the subjectivity of it. I think I'll admit, the question I'm most proud of is the Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Living Dead, because I'm going to give you a secret. I haven't seen Dawn of the Dead. I have never seen Dawn of the Dead. I watched clips of it. I read the summary. I have not actually watched that movie. So that was I did not think I was going to win that one. I didn't think I was going to win that one. I thought Dan had that one in the bag, but I surprised myself there. So that was a really fun argument, really back and forth. I've also never seen John Wick, so I guess I just should only argue movies that I haven't seen.
I would like to change all my votes because he has not seen John Wick. He loses.
Yeah, I vote for Dan for everything now.
I need to see John Wick. I was 14 when it came out, so I never, when the first one came out. Are you serious?
14?
What?
Oh, you were
14 in 2014. Yeah. Unless it came out like October, then I was 15.
It did come out.
Well, that changes everything.
That's the takeaway.
October 14th. That's exactly when it came out.
But anyway, I mean, I've had debates in which I've debated against movies I've never seen, and God, it just shows knowledge of the movie do help, and if you've seen it, it does help. But it's about how you debate and sort of what point does you can easily counter points in which you did, but you definitely countered the whole just because it's first doesn't mean it's the best. But is there anyone that you would like to face in this at all?
I don't know kind of record-wise or anything like that who to face. I think James just pointed at himself for a second, and I'd love to take him on. I think that'd be a really fun kind of back and forth. So I would take on James. But yeah, I'll take on anybody. This is more fun. This isn't, kind of where you have to just study and really. This is more kind of just kind of a fun kind of, just back and forth kind of an improv thing. And I like doing this, So I had a really good time. Yeah, it was a whole lot of fun.
Yeah, and I'll go to talk to my judges. Brian, what did you think about this match overall?
I enjoyed this match quite a bit. It was close. I was looking back on my votes, and I actually voted for Dan for 3 of the 5 rounds, and so if it had gone by that, I would have given him the win. But that, Caleb won, and I don't fault that at all, because Caleb easily could have won any one of these arguments. Every one of these, I think, was a pretty hard decision for me. So I was impressed by them, and I'm a little intimidated if I ever try and do this myself, because it shows just how difficult it can be.
And James, what did you think of the match overall?
This was a really fun match. Dan, I don't want you to be discouraged at all, because you had some great answers. I think I believe voted for you 3 out of 5 rounds. I could be 2 out of 3 or 2 out of 5 instead of 3 out of 5, but I mean, it was a close match. So it was not one-sided whatsoever. I think you had some of the better answers, like Caleb said. I think he just beat you in a couple of the arguments. It was such a close match, and it's 1 point here or there. One person hears one thing and that sways it. So it was a really close one. I had a lot of fun. Don't be discouraged, Dan. You played a great match. Congrats to Caleb, though.
Yeah, no, I definitely concur. But it was definitely a lot closer than what you may think. It's
it was a 1 point. It's a 1 point victory.
Exactly. That's why we have 3 judges now, Battleground, because there's been a lot of times when it's been one judge. A lot of people feel like there is a bit of bias, but 3 judges, you've got 3 people taking out different things and sort of have maybe they've got different ratings on judge debate. It's one of those ones you can say something that, but if it gets counted, then it may not count. But But anyway, we could go on for ages talking about this, but we'll go to plugs. Brian, where can people find you on the interwebs?
You can find me around all the usual fan leagues out here playing trivia. I'm helping write and host on over in Multiplex Movie Warzone. I'm on Facebook. My name Brian Michaels. If you use Letterboxd, I'm under Cinemaphile. That's about it.
And Caleb, where can people find you on the interwebs?
Yeah, you can find me playing trivia here at Full Metal, playing a movie Battlegrounds, playing Multiplex, anywhere good trivia is found. You can find me on all different kinds of social media thingies and doodads, Twitter, Facebook, whatever. Letterboxd, that's an important one because I like being on Letterboxd, and I write reviews sometimes on there, but not all the time. But yeah, and make lists and Letterboxd is a whole lot of fun. Just Caleb Boatman, search me up there. That's how you'll find me there. And then my podcast, Burns and the Boatman, or Will Burn Your Houseboat Down, whatever the title is, whatever Jay chooses to call it that. That's my podcast with Jay, the arsonist Burns. We have a whole lot of fun there talking about different topics, sometimes doing top tens, whatever we feel like doing. It's just kind of fun, whatever. And the channel that's on is the Jason Murray, JaysonMurray. That's the name of the channel. Find it on there. It's a whole lot of fun. Check out that podcast.
Dan, where can people find you online?
You can always find me under my name or Dan Skip Allen on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Pinterest, or at From the Fourth Row at WordPress.com, where I write about movies, or the website that I work for called Cinesportstalk.com. That's Cinesportstalk.com, where I write about sports and movies.
And James, we can people find you online?
You guys can find me competing in Full Metal Trivia. Had a pretty great team match with my my partner Brandon Hanna against Brian and his boy Joseph. So go check that out. It's one hell of a match. And also had a singles match against Caleb Boatman over here. So that should be dropping very soon. That's also one hell of a match. So go watch both of these. You can find me on Twitter, on Instagram, and on Letterboxd. My tag is Gator24, G4TOR24. I'm always doing reviews and posts and all that good stuff. So come check me out there. I'm still trying to get into Multiplex, so if you guys have some ins, I need some matches over in Multiplex. So,
and you can find me on Take 3 Productions, where I host Winkham every Sunday night. I don't know what the topic is at the time this will post, but we've had a few good ones. We had fictional presidents of movies and TV, and we've had other things. And you can also find me on Full Metal and Multiplex, competing all over there, and Twitter, Letterboxd, and Stardust at Malthor. And from all of us here, from Brian, James, Dan, Caleb, and myself, we'll see you on the Battleground.